Hi, and welcome to Vlogs of History, episode 3. I'm your host, Darius Cosden, and today we turn back the clock a little bit further this time, the medieval era. Knights, kings, epic wars, crusades, and disease. That's what the medieval era was all about. And in particular, there was one disease that had a pretty big impact on Europe, the Black Death. And that's the topic of today's video, so let's get to it. The Black Plague was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. It hit Europe in the middle of the 14th century, and modern-day scientists believe it to have originated in China, where it made its way through Asia and eventually to Europe by sea. It arrived to Europe when a bunch of trading ships arrived at the Sicily docks in what we know today as Italy. When the ships arrived, they saw that pretty much everybody was dead. And those who weren't dead, well, they were almost on the brink of death. They would be in horrible pain, they would be vomiting, and they, strangely enough, had these black boils on their skin that would spit out blood. And that's how the disease eventually got its name, the Black Death. When the Sicilian authorities saw this, well, they immediately ordered the ships to be sent out of the docks, but by then it had been too late already and the Black Death had made contact with Europe. It then went on to kill an estimated 40 to 50% of the entire European population in just 4 years. Now that's one heck of a strong disease. The Black Death was originally found in rats, and it made its way through humans when fleas would bite and suck on the blood of the rats and then transmit that blood to a human. Now when you were infected, you were pretty much guaranteed death. In those times, if you had the Black Death, well, you were gonna die within a few days no matter what. It was also very highly contagious. You could just touch somebody else's clothes that was infected and you would be infected yourself. Even if you sneezed, everybody around you would be guaranteed to be infected. It was so bad that if the disease got into your household, you were guaranteed that your whole family would be dead by the end of the week. This obviously scared the entire European population. I mean, who wouldn't be? They were so scared, in fact, that they took drastic measures of quarantining themselves. They started isolating themselves. People would leave their loved ones when they were showing signs of being infected. Some people even opted to go to the sewers in an attempt to quarantine themselves. That's how crazy people were. And back then, medicine really wasn't evolved like it is today. Pretty much modern medicine was non-existent at the time. So how did they respond to the Black Death? How did they try to prevent it or cure it? Well, they turned to religion. In those times, everybody was religious and everybody believed in God. So naturally, they believed that they were being punished by God for being a bad society, for sinning and all that bad stuff. And what do you do when you've been punished by God? Well, you seek mercy. And that's what they tried to do. And one way of seeking mercy was to inflict pain on themselves. They thought that if they inflicted pain on themselves, well, God would have mercy on them and then they would get rid of the plague. So much so that you literally had groups of people that would band together, go from town to town, publicly inflicting pain on themselves as a form of ritual to cleanse the society of the plague. It's crazy what people would do and what resorts they would go to, but also very interesting. They also thought the Jews were to blame for the plague. They used the Jews as scapegoats and essentially blamed them that God was being mad at them, and because of that, God unleashed the plague onto everybody. And what do you do when you have a scapegoat and a reason why the plague in the Middle Ages? Well, you kill them. And that's what they did. They killed the Jews, and they killed a lot of them. The Jews had a very, very tough time during the Middle Ages. But interestingly enough, they were the ones who appear to have been the least affected by the plague. I mean, they simply just did not die as much as non-Jews did. This is believed to be because of the Jewish law that requires them to bathe at least once a week and to wash their hands before meals, which greatly increased their hygiene and thus prevented them from getting that sick. When non-Jews realized that the Jews were not dying as much, well, they had much more reason to blame the Jews for the plague and thus much more reason to kill them. And that's what they did. They killed even more Jews. It was a really bad plague and very, very dark time. I mean, physicians would not see patients. Priests would not see people in hope of getting a cure. Nobody would see anyone. Everybody was seeking isolation and trying to be as far away from the disease as possible. It was very bad. You could go to bed perfectly healthy and wake up on the brink of death, sick, or even dead sometimes. By the beginning of the week, you could have your whole family, and by the end of the week, you could have, well, nobody left. The European outbreak of the Black Death eventually calmed down because the plague was managing to kill people faster than it was able to infect more people. So as soon as you got infected, you would die so fast that you didn't always have the chance to infect somebody else. And eventually it just calmed down for the European. It also came out in other places in different times, but it was never as intense as it was in medieval Europe. I mean, literally, we're talking 50% of the European population here. That's almost all of it. That's crazy. Alright, so that was it for episode 3 of Vlogs of History. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to be notified when episode 4 comes out. If you haven't seen them already, you can check out the previous episodes, which I will link right here. As always, I'm your host, Darius Cosden. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you next Monday.